I'm getting this point out of the way first because despite having tickled it in other videos, I just couldn't resist. It's too darn important to me.
The properties of people and the properties of character have almost nothing to do with each other.
So here's a curveball. I don't like Sorkin's dialogue style at all. The thing he's most known for, I find his excessive quipping annoying and hard to believe, yet this quote of his basically opened up my third, fourth, and fifth eyes as a writer, so he must be forgiven. In my Avatar video, I explained why I didn't have a problem with simple characters, because the essence of a character was never to mimic the complexity of a human being. Characters are apparitions. They are not fully fledged people, and no matter how hard you try to make them so, you will fail. And thank God, because it wouldn't work for shit. The diversity of our lived experience is vast and jumbled. We grow and change, sure, but we don't have perfectly paced 3-act character arcs, and there is just so much happening. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say I decide to take my life and look at it through the lens of, pick a theme, loneliness, and so I pick out all the moments in which loneliness is relevant, and I arrange them into a chronological list of scenes divided into 3 acts, and I write a movie about the theme of loneliness, and I win the Oscar, and I'm in the bathroom doing coke with Leo, and he's like, "Hey local, congrats on the Oscar, but I'm kind of confused." And I'm like, "What for, Leo?" And he's like, "Well, you said this was a movie about your life, but your family was only in it for a few minutes, you skipped over most of your childhood, and the majority of scenes were just you getting rejected by women in boots. That's not a complete picture of you. I'm sorry, man, I just don't get it." And I'm like, "It's okay, Leo. Let me break it down for you." Look, basically, characters are survival kits. If you want to go out into the wilderness of creativity and conquer some grand theme or concept, you can't be hauling around every single one of your possessions. You bring what's necessary, you leave the rest at home. Even those comfy slippers, even that cool little doodad from the pawn shop.
Feed him to the pig.
Maximize your efficiency. I had a mentor in high school who made me cut my scripts in half and then in half again. It annoyed the shit out of me at the time, but it was one of the most important lessons I ever learned about writing. I would think to myself, if I keep cutting off the fluff, I'll never have a full feature film script. I'll just keep ending up with short films. And his voice would appear in my head and remind me that a 20-page script where every character, scene, and line matters is vastly superior to a script that uses extraneous character details and irrelevant subplots to buff out its screen time under the guise of being more three-dimensional. Depth is not good for its own sake. Figure out which parts of your characters' backstories are relevant to the story and burn the rest. And might I add that not only are characters not real people, their world is not the real world that we live in. When you're trying to figure out if a plot beat in your story works, don't ask yourself, is this plausible or is this realistic? Ask yourself instead, is this right? Does this make sense given what I've established about my world and the characters with whom I've populated it? Is this character's fate derived from random chaos that I as a writer have imposed upon them? Or is it a result of their own choices and the choices of their fellow characters? Oh hey, what's the fanfiction community doing here? Probably being weird. Just kidding, I don't have a problem with you guys, but that's not to say I won't pick apart your methods. Respectfully, I know most of you are like 14. Sometimes I get really engrossed in an online community, but I don't make my presence known in any way. I just silently observe it like a caveman investigating a brush fire. At some point I realized that my Instagram Explore page was 99% pastel squares and Tumblr screenshots, all hell-bent on suffocating me with the term OC. Said many an aspiring writer, everyone meet my character. Here is a complete description of their personality, their icks, their quirks, their hobbies, their likes, their dating habits, and what... You want to know how they fit into the greater thematic whole of the story? Oh. Well, the thing about that... Obviously, I know some people just like to design characters and furnish them with traits and not thrust them into a greater story. That's fine. But many do, and I think the online writing community has failed to push those people in the right direction. The discourse they're forced to participate in is basically, "Oh my god, I'm doing enemies to lovers. Here's a list of 9,000 underused character tropes.
I know these characters
and I'm
so
like,
well.
Whoa! Do you know what your story is about? Give me a log line. What do you mean you haven't thought of a plot yet? What exactly do you think a plot is? A pinball machine you can drop your fully formed characters into? Look at me. Look into my weary writer eyes. Do you want to make cool shit? You certainly don't have to want that, but if you do, if you want to engineer the next hit series, it's my opinion that you need to completely reevaluate the relationship between your characters and your plot. So here's my writing process. If it doesn't work for you, that's cool. There are many ways to arrive at one's destination, and speaking from experience, the last thing I want anybody to do is take a stranger's writing advice as divine law, but I'm going to share it on the off chance that you've been looking for a fresh perspective. So step 1. What is your story about? A premise, a situation, call it what you will. In one sentence, what are you writing about? Figure that out, and then you move into step 2. What characters naturally belong in this situation? I like to take all of the possible perspectives one could have on the situation and boil each opinion down to a single character. And step 3, define their relationships. It's surprisingly easy. If you have 7 characters, they might have varying degrees of trust in one another. Which characters would become friends given their perspectives? Which ones would become enemies? Wait, enemies, that's conflict. Now you have step 4, plot. You have 7 characters, each with a unique angle on the situation. That situation could be anything from a broken home to an alien war, but it doesn't matter because whatever it is, your characters were custom made for it because you decided on the premise first. Around this time, you might find the protagonist emerging and you might not. It's okay to not have a clear-cut protagonist. All that matters is that you have relevant characters with relevant perspectives, and since they themselves are so invested in the story, they're going to start making decisions. Look at them go, they're factioning up, they're backstabbing. Wow, those two are... You'll notice that I have not mentioned my characters' personalities yet. That's because I think personalities usually develop as a result of the core motivations. Think about your personality. Think about what excites you, what worries you. Is that just decoration? No, it's tied to your soul. It's tied to your core motivation in life. And you already got core motivations worked out in step 2, baby! So at least in my experience, personality kind of just happens. But bottom line, if I fully develop a character and get attached before I even know how that character slots into the bigger picture, it throws my writing process into complete chaos. So take what you will from all that. This one is even more me-specific than the last one. It's a principle I've stood by through thick and thin, and I don't expect many people to agree with it, but here it is anyway. The horror genre is unique because it's almost always gauged by how the viewer feels. It's a visceral type of entertainment. I go into a horror movie wanting to feel the neurochemical sensation of fear. I pay for that experience, and I gauge how worthwhile it was based on how strong my physical and emotional response was. And that logic can be applied all across the board. Drama, did it make me cry? Action, was I on the edge of my seat? By all means, chase that feeling of immersion. Let your feelings be your guiding light so long as you don't go throwing around the O word. What concerns me, though, is writing advice to the tune of how to make the audience cry. It strikes me as kind of manipulative. I just don't like when people talk about art that way. I can't really put my finger on why, but even stuff like make your character more relatable so people care just feels really backwards to me. I found so much more catharsis in focusing on the characters' emotions, letting them go on their journeys and not worrying about the audience's expectations. I can't let a force from beyond the fourth wall influence my story. It would almost feel like corruption. But at the same time, I want my art to be loved. And if it weren't for my favorite stories moving me so deeply, I'd have no motivation to write at all. So there's that. I think one of the hallmarks of an insecure writer is their reluctance to let the dialogue do any work. A lot of viewers and writers draw a line between talking and doing, because obviously they're different. One involves saying things with your mouth whole, the other one involves big action set pieces, duh. But really, do you know what a legal trial is? It's a bunch of humans standing in a room together saying words, and depending on what words are said, the fate of another human is decided. Sometimes that human is locked in a cage forever, sometimes that human is killed, but communication is so much more than an abstract plane we use to manage physical events. It's transformative. Through the act of speaking, we can achieve personal progress. A conversation can be an emotional journey on the other side of which both parties emerge different. Language is the most advanced tool we have at our disposal, and its breadth as a medium of expression is unparalleled. If a character is happy, there are near infinite ways they could express their happiness. Their word choice and delivery, their self-perception, their perception of others all tell us specifics about them. And if any line in your script could be said by any character, well, then you're probably not using the medium of verbal communication as effectively as you could be. A conversation can be the climax of a story. A single word can hold immense narrative weight in the right context, not to mention fully fleshed out stories that consists solely of people talking in rooms. Yeah, welcome to narrative, there's a lot of that. And this brings me back to number 3. You can't deprive your audience of necessary conversations because you're worried too much talking would bore them. It certainly might, but that's their problem, not yours. If 2 characters are in a room together, give them a meaningful interaction. And if you can't think of anything they might say, you might want to reevaluate your cast and how well they serve the theme. You can use dialogue as a litmus test to see how necessary a character really is. And you can use it to define existing physical events in the story and give them additional context. Show Don't Tell is for 5th grade book reports. I am tired of being told by writing gurus that dialogue should only be used when absolutely necessary. And don't sleep on the raw societal power words can have either. At the ancient site of Opus, the army of Alexander the Great turned on him, and he won them all back with tears in their eyes by climbing onto a rock and saying the perfect combination of words. Words have shaped the course of history. Words have seated themselves so deeply in the collective consciousness of the human race that we proclaim them to be the commandments of God. So, do me a favor and think long and hard before you tell a writer that their script is too wordy. Maybe it's you. Anyways. Earlier I mentioned that once you get your characters situated, they might just start going at it, and they might start doing things that you didn't have in mind when you initially conceived your story idea. There may be an urge to try and reach into the story to correct their courses back to the way you want it. Maybe a character you quite liked has become much darker and more unhealthy than you imagined. Maybe even a protagonist. It's your story, of course. You can choose to strike your characters down with bolts of lightning or nudge them along in whatever way you see fit. But just this once, humor me and do none of that. Sit back with a cocktail, hands 100% off, and see what paths your characters take. You might find that without your protection, one dies much sooner than expected. You might find that a side character, now free from your hierarchy of importance, grows into a prominent main player and steals the show. I've seen all of these things happen, and I genuinely believe that stories do write themselves sometimes. Oh, but don't literally type anything yet. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. All this is the outline phase. Sticky notes. Hundreds of sticky notes. Make a timeline. Keep things moving until that organic story emerges. Then crystallize it into a draft. I don't believe in write drunk, edit sober. Put some actual thought into it. Get it right. Your first draft doesn't need to be depressing sludge, and writing is so much more than scripting. Don't put yourself down for not pumping out page after page after page. That time will come. And finally opening up that blank document with a clear head and a plan is, to me, incalculably more satisfying than endlessly drafting and redrafting until you go insane. So, that's my piece. That's all 5 of my things. I trust that you can tell when I'm being hyperbolic, but I do sincerely hope that you gain something of value from my rants or at least enjoyed them. And then Leo's like, listen, man, I'm just an actor. Wait, no, stop. I have to say a thing. I did not think the Avatar video would pop off in the way that it did. I was about ready to just abandon the YouTube thing forever because it does take a long time to make those videos. And anybody who's attempted it could agree with that. But I just remember sitting there in bed that night and watching all these positive comments come in and not being able to sleep because it was just making me so happy to see the reception that my video was getting. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who watched that, who liked, who subscribed. I had 16 subs before I put that out, and now I'm pushing 7,000, I believe. So this has been a change, and now I can't stop thinking of things to make videos about. I'm seeing Avatar on Saturday, and that'll be the next thing I talk about on this channel, but I don't just want to put out a review as quickly as I can. I'm going to let it simmer. I'm going to think of something new to say. But until then, thanks for showing up, and happy holidays.